Hello there. Is all nudity pornography? How do we define porn? Is porn evil? Is porn okay for married people? Is porn a good alternative to adultery or fornication? Do men need to have sexual release? And is porn the way to go? Before we get into all that, subscribe to my channel, turn on notifications so that you don't miss any new uploads. What is porn? My favorite response to that kind of a question is, we all know it when we see it. The word itself, if you break it down, means the writing or drawing of the prostitutes. Pornography was always meant to serve eroticism. It is meant to take the place of a prostitute. That is what it describes. A person is to interact with pornography in the way that he would with a prostitute. A basic definition of pornography, then, is material that depicts erotic behavior or something intended to arouse or by and large, has that effect. Is all nudity pornographic? Well, no. And neither is all pornography nude. The paintings in the Sistine Chapel aren't pornography. It isn't material which depicts erotic behavior. It doesn't depict nudity with the intention of arousing, nor does it have that effect. And if it did, that sounds like a you problem. There's a big difference. One helps us to appreciate the dignity of the person. The other teaches us to use the person as a thing for a selfish end. And we're not only talking about videos, images, even books. Books like, for example, 50 Shades of Grey. It was a bestseller, and not because it was so well written, but because it was clearly pornographic. Pornography is material which depicts erotic behavior, material intended to arouse or has that effect. What's the problem? What is the problem with pornography? Is it wrong to be sexually aroused by a person? No. However, it is the moment that the will is engaged, then you're in control. So you see someone walk down the street, you find them attractive, then what? When you engage the will, when you take control, which is the second after you feel the sexual desire, that's when this natural sex drive or sexual attraction or arousal becomes lust. The problem with pornography is that the human person is a good. Good by virtue of being made in God's image. A good towards which the only proper and adequate attitude is love. If our society is at all gaining a better understanding of the evil of pornography, it will always fall short without Christ and Christianity. We see this in things like the Me Too movement. It falls short, and you have people saying things like, well, if two people consent to degrading one another, then it's okay. No. It either is or isn't wrong to degrade a human being. Consent has nothing to do with that. What a thing to say that a person can consent to their own degradation, that they can consent to being abused. What a strange thought. Now, that's not to say that a woman, for example, who opens up an OnlyFans account isn't making a choice. She is choosing it, and it's a bad choice. But that choice is ill-informed, sad, and motivated by a distorted self-perception and by disordered desires. We tend to stick to the consequences of pornography in order to show that it is evil, that it is a bad thing and we shouldn't promote or consume it. And that isn't a bad way to go. It's not a bad way to argue against pornography, especially with all the research from neuroscience, sociology, psychology. Like, if you watch lots of porn, your penis won't work, or your marriage will fail. Porn is addictive, it hurts your brain. But other behaviors have similar consequences. Gambling, for example. You can go bankrupt and ruin your marriage and family. You can be addicted to gambling. And certainly a gambler experiences or causes other terrible outcomes. It's also often coupled with other vices. But why don't we put gambling and pornography in the same category? Why don't we put them on the same moral level? Why is it intrinsically evil to treat a person who is an end in and of themselves merely as a means to a selfish end? Because the human person is the kind of being that is meant to be loved. What does it mean to love? The opposite of to love is to use. And we can use people in ways other than sexually, like your manager at work treating you like a cog in a wheel, treating you like a thing and not a person, or like when you have workmen in your house, a plumber, for example, fixing your toilet, and you avoid any and all interaction with them. You just want to avoid them and let them get on with what it is they're there to do without having to ask them about their life. My mum always made them tea and offered them sandwiches and told them her life story. But she's Middle Eastern. There's a distinction, similar to there being a distinction between a gambling addiction and a pornography addiction. There's a distinction between pornography and using another human being for a service, for a different kind of service, like a plumber. Treating your employees as cogs in a wheel, wishing the workmen in your home were impersonal robots who are just going to do the job and leave. These are clearly not evil in the same sense as pornography is, as the porn industry and the consumption of porn is. And that's not just me justifying my own introversion. Pornography, by its very nature, entices the consumer to treat a person as a thing. The other examples share a depersonalization with pornography, but unlike pornography, the two examples are not intrinsically evil. They do not cause an offense so grave against the intrinsic value of a person. Pornography is intrinsically evil when you acknowledge what sex is and what for. That's the key. The teleology of the sexual act. Meaning, the explanation of sex in terms of the purpose it serves. Telos, meaning aim, end, goal, and logos, meaning explanation or reason. This point goes back to what I said earlier about falling short without Christ and Christianity. I don't think you can get all the way to a society that knows and behaves accordingly that pornography is an intrinsic evil without understanding and accepting what sex is and what for. We have to wed the subjective with the objective. They go together. If your argument against porn consumption is solely based on experience and consequence, if we're only looking at those and we don't wed those to objective reality or to the teleology of the sexual act, then we can end with subjectivism. And a subjectivistic argument leads to, well, if two people consent, pornography directs what is a natural human desire, that is the sexual desire. Porn directs it to suppress the personhood of the performer and of the self. That's a further distinction. The levels of using, of depersonalization. I'm not obligated to have a deeply intimate and personal conversation or relationship with the guy fixing my toilet. I shouldn't merely use him. I certainly should not abuse him. I should uphold his dignity. I should respect him as a human being. But there are different levels. That relationship, that interaction is not the same as with a sexual partner. as with a spouse. When selfish ends direct us, we evaluate based on whether or not a person pleases or serves us. One of the major ways in which this conforming of the mind to evil is represented in modern culture is dating apps. Swipe, swipe, swipe. Now, take that habit, that practice, and push it out of the context of a dating app. Because that's what happens with the conforming of the mind. There is the meditation, the focus, and the thing upon which you meditate. And from that grows your outlook, your beliefs, your behaviors. So, pushing out, you treat people as if they exist for you, for your pleasure and or whatever other selfish end. That's what the culture of the world teaches. That the people around you exist for your satisfaction, and you adopt attitudes like, if you were more attractive, maybe we could have a better conversation. Or if you were the same color as me or the same age as me, maybe I'd be more inclined to talk to you. Happens in church, because when you meditate and focus upon worldly things, it pushes out. So of course you're going to bring it in to church. The human being is the only creature that exists for his own sake. When we look at a person and we evaluate the person based on whether or not they're pleasing to me, we're contrarily saying, you exist for my sake. How, then, do we truly love one another? If to use the other or to treat the other as a means for my sake is contrary to love, how do we gain the eyes to enable us to see the dignity of the other person as someone who exists for their own sake? Yep. It's a matter of reconforming your mind to virtue, to holiness, to innocence. A good start is stop watching porn. Or maybe you don't formally consume porn, as in you don't watch pornography, you don't view it, but you create fantasies in your mind and you have sexual release through that. That is also pornographic material, going by the definition given. It is likewise a means through which lust is exercised. So pornography is the exact opposite of love. To love one another, to hold to the right and true and virtuous vision of the body and human sexuality, is an invitation to come and become one who sees. Porn in marriage. The general attitude towards this topic is either one of avoidance or fear. That's what I've noticed, and that's the first indication that it doesn't belong in your life nor in your marriage. Nor does masturbation, but that's a different video. I've heard opinions like, men can't help it. Porn is a natural exploration in adolescence. God made man to have multiple sexual partners, and if porn keeps my husband from committing adultery, then great. If I confront my husband's porn use, he might expect me to play out his fantasies. Or, if I confront his porn use, I'm being unreasonable and over the top. It's really not that big of a deal. And similar justifications are made from parent to child or teenager. I don't believe any wife is okay with her husband masturbating to random people and scenes on a screen, and then being expected to desire him and have sex with him, as if those two things are exactly the same, and that no matter what you do or what depraved behaviors you adopt, your wife will always just find you sexually attractive and be available for you in that way. No, man. I think she justifies it out of avoidance because it's awkward, or because she doesn't want to shame or embarrass him, or I believe she tolerates it because she has a low view of men. Again, same could be said about a parent toward a child. So there are 4 claims or beliefs that I'm going to give my thoughts on. 1, porn addiction isn't a real thing. 2, the belief that porn use is better than adultery or fornication. 3, that married men need or benefit from porn use should they be expected to remain monogamous. And 4, the belief that porn use is justified if the husband is deprived of sex with his wife for some reason. Some people, usually consumers of porn, will claim that there's no such thing as a porn addiction. They'll say that no one is ever really addicted to porn. That the real problem is outdated religious beliefs that make you feel guilty. Neuroscientists used to think that in order for something to be addictive, it had to be a substance, something external that you brought into your body, like alcohol or pills. We now know that behaviors can be just as addictive as substances. In the DSM-5, for example, pathological gambling comes under the term addiction. No substance is ingested, yet we recognize that gambling can become addictive. Or the ICD-11 for the UK recognizes that patients with compulsive sexual behavior disorder consume pornography, masturbate, and or are promiscuous, and that these behaviors are out of control and lead to distress and impairment. Neurological studies on porn users lends strong support for the addiction model. What that means is that the findings of those studies mirror studies done on substance abuse. I understand the hesitancy to recognize porn as an addiction. Part of you thinks the person is making excuses for their behavior, when really they have more control than they admit. And that might be true. However, just because a term can be abused doesn't mean that it can't be used correctly. Drug addiction messes up a person's brain. If you scanned a drug addict's brain and a healthy brain, you would see a significant difference. These neuroscience-based studies show the same thing or very similar things in the brains of porn consumers. Not to mention the masses of men who have broken free of this addiction and testify to that freedom. Is porn better than adultery and fornication? Better in what sense? I think a more appropriate way to phrase the question would be, is porn the lesser of 3 evils? In which case, a case could be made that a husband who is consuming porn is less evil than if he commits adultery, or that a single Christian who is consuming porn is less of an evil than if that Christian went out and fornicated. Sure, a case can be made, but why waste your time justifying a lesser evil when you could pursue a good? The root of all 3 is lust. Lust is deviancy. Porn is a means through which that deviancy is exacerbated. Things like adultery and fornication begin as lusts in the heart. They begin in the inner self. In a marriage, there is no justification for adultery, and there is no justification for porn consumption. Better isn't the right way to frame the conversation, because it's not at all good, nor is it a path to good. It is merely a lesser evil waiting to graduate. As for fornication, same thing. Loneliness, for example, isn't a justification for porn consumption, nor is it a justification for fornication. Sin always starts with the interior person. People don't commit grave sins like adultery out of nowhere. It starts with lust in the heart. It starts with the inner self, the conditioning of the mind to perverse, deviant sexual fantasy. It's a perfectly sensible thing, then, for a man to watch his thoughts and desires and private behaviors, to guard his interior self against the consumption of obscene, morally reprehensible material as found in porn, or as a man may make up in his imagination. Job in the Old Testament said, "I have made a covenant with my eyes not to lust after a young woman." If the mind, the thought life, the heart doesn't matter, why did Job believe that such a covenant kept him innocent before God? Because lust happens inside a person first. Then, if that fantasy is fed like a beast, it will grow until it is too big for the confines of the inner self, bursting out from within a man and then seen in his deeds. Are men polygamous by nature? Who cares? Irrelevant. Just because a man may be inclined toward a thing doesn't mean that that thing is right and good, and that he should do all he can to fulfill that inclination. Did God create for Adam a bunch of women whom he can visit Or did he create from and for Adam a wife? Inclinations aren't necessarily indicators of moral good, nor of what is best for us. We are called to self-denial. The call of Christ is, come, die, so that you may live. What kind of love is this? A husband claims to love his wife like Christ loves the church, while he masturbates to increasingly grotesque material that objectifies human beings made in the image of God. Get a grip. If a wife isn't meeting her husband's sexual needs, is porn justified? There's 3 scenarios that come to mind. Spoiler alert, the answer is no to all 3. First, let's say that your wife is ill, and that this ill health, for whatever reason, means that you both are unable to be intimate. Of the 3, this one has the most sympathy. Second scenario, the sex with your wife isn't good enough, whatever that means. And third, the sex is good enough, but you have a particularly high sex drive, and porn is the best outlet for that. You may otherwise be tempted to commit adultery. Like I said, the answer to the question, is porn justified, is always no. Masturbation and porn use are not replacements for marital sexual intimacy. It is not a replacement for what sex is and what for. It is, in fact, the total opposite. They're not the same. Marriage in Hebrew translates to holy. The word is kodesh. A woman, whether your wife or porn performer, is not merely a warm body for you to masturbate in or to. A woman is not an outlet for your sexual needs, and a man's sexual urges shouldn't be seen as something simply needing to be released, as if he were an animal with no control, no ability nor reason to control himself. A man who is in the clutches of pornography is incapacitated to love his wife. You could have the meanest, most bitter wife, and that still wouldn't justify porn use. In the case of ill health, again, your call as a husband is to love your wife. Your call as a Christian is to deny the self. It's difficult. Lack of sexual intimacy due to ill health deserves sympathy, but it cannot make an evil thing good. Bad situations don't justify moral evils. As a rule, neither husband nor wife should deprive the other of sexual intimacy. In a marriage, the wife's body belongs to her husband and the husband's body belongs to his wife. Nothing, however, is justification for seeking to satisfy oneself elsewhere or some other way. The sexual union between husband and wife is an act of gifting, of love, of offering oneself wholly to the other. It is not fornication. It is not masturbation. It is not the kind of thing depicted in pornography. If you have an intimacy problem in your marriage, watching porn won't help. It'll make it worse. Porn won't bring you closer to your wife or to a happier marriage. And it won't keep you from acting out the lusts that you are feeding. It will, in fact, in reality, create new lusts. That's the nature of an addiction. At first, it's a little. It's just a little bit. Just a little every now and then that's not enough. So it's a little more, and then a little more, and then a little more. If the sex isn't good enough, you first and foremost hold a deficient view of sex. Build the proper foundation to uphold the beauty and purpose of the creation of love and sex in marriage. Porn necessarily degrades our deepest understanding of human value for the sake of sexual satisfaction. We have desires. Desires tend to enslave us. They tend to pull us into themselves until we are nothing without them, consumed by them. Laws are an exterior way for us to understand how it is that we can be free from such desires. The desires themselves aren't wrong. Sexual desire is not wrong. The problem is when they capture you and you take them and play with them out of their context. When you become subordinate to them. Sin enslaves. Lust is something that takes from you. It takes from your marriage. It takes from your view of women. It does not add anything good. And this isn't a truth that is limited to the Christian faith. This is an objective moral truth. Porn leads to sexual slavery. It in fact is created upon sexual slavery rather than sexual freedom. Right. If you feel that you are addicted to pornography, or your husband or your son or whatever, they or you certainly feel trapped and ashamed. You may not want to expose yourself, for lack of a better word, immediately, because you're afraid of being judged and you have that sense of shame. That's okay. You can start somewhere else. Eventually, you will see that it's not an uncommon problem, especially among men. There are YouTube channels dedicated to helping men, helping Christians to build that foundation, to be sexually free. There are books, The Porn Myth by Matt Fradd. Matt Fradd also runs a 21-day course for men called Strive 21. It's a 21-day detox from porn. There is Theology of the Body by Christopher West. That's not directly about porn. It helps, though, build our foundational beliefs surrounding the body and sex. If you're a woman struggling with pornography or masturbation or sex addiction, there is magdalaministries.org. And then there's Covenant Eyes, which is for men, women, families. It's an app that you install on your devices. It's basically a filter. It actually goes into the page, not just to scan the text, but they have image recognition software. So as you're using Covenant Eyes, low-res pictures are taken every now and then, and if it's flagged as being pornographic, your accountability partner will be emailed. And it's good because it connects you into relationship, real relationship. It gives you real accountability with the people who love you. We have more self-control than we're willing to admit. That's true. The reason we so easily give in to porn and masturbation and sexual fantasy is simple. We give in because the door is closed, the room is darkened, the blinds are shut, we're alone. If you knew that you were being watched, however, you'd behave different. If you were Truman on The Truman Show, how long do you think you'd hold out before giving in? You'd probably live up to a stronger sense of self-control because there's accountability and because the act itself is shameful. Hence why Covenant Eyes is good, especially within a marriage where you have a past issue or a present issue with pornography. Do that for your spouse. It's not unreasonable. It's not controlling. It's for the good of your marriage. It's for the success of your marriage. Why would you want to hold on to this behavior if it is hurting and harming your marriage and your spouse? Why is it so important to you? Why is it in fact more important to you to have the freedom to do this at the cost of this real human being, your real sexual partner, and your marriage and your family? Is it worth it? As for parents, your children shouldn't have access to technology, okay? Unless, if they absolutely need it, say for schoolwork or for educational purposes or, whatever, then they should have Covenant Eyes or something similar on their devices. Unless you yourself are willing to monitor them. All these issues of sexual ethics matter, to me at least, ultimately for the sake of children, for the sake of the next generations. Children are exposed to pornography at horrifically early ages. And in this age, it's not just porn. They're being sexually exploited and exposed to sexual deviancies and lust in school, as in part of the curriculum. It's not just their peers. It's a part of the education system. Porn is something that entraps and ensnares us. It keeps us spiritually low. It harms our psychology. It interferes with healthy relationship building and with sexual health. It destroys marriage and our theology of sex and the body. Porn addiction is a real thing, and the further we've moved into the digital age, the worse it's all become. Pornography is not something to be tolerated or belittled in your marriage or in your home. It is not a better alternative to adultery or fornication. It is a slow poison. And the belief that porn use can be justified in a marriage is so misguided. All of it misses the beauty of intimacy between the spouses, for the family, and for society. That's all, folks. Remember to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and turn on notifications so that you don't miss any new uploads. My name is Christ Defender. I defend the Christian faith. I answer questions and criticisms concerning Christianity. If you like what I do, there are 3 ways you can support what I do. Monthly support via Patreon, one-off support via PayPal, or buy my merch. I did. Please and thanks. See you later.